If you are looking for more personalized support through a structured course that's focused on what the AAMC needs you to be focused on to do well, to maximize your score with the MCAT and the CARS section specifically, go to jackwestin.com and check out his MCAT CARS strategy course. And if you sign up, let them know that you heard about them here on the podcast. The MCAT CARS podcast, session number 45. The CARS section of the MCAT gives thousands of pre-meds nightmares every night. Whether you're an ESL student, lack confidence while reading, or a slow reader like me, Jack Westin and the medical school headquarters are here to help you score higher in every section so you can be confident you're ready to get the MCAT score of your dreams. Welcome to the MCAT CARS podcast. My name is Dr. Ryan Gray, here with you again with Jack Westin from jackwestin.com. As I mentioned earlier, go check out the course at jackwestin.com. Let them know you heard about them here on the podcast. Today we have a hard passage. Now, Jack said it was going to be fun and easy, but I thought it was hard. So hopefully my struggles will help you improve with your CARS score. Jack Westin back for some more MCAT CARS podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How's it going, Ryan?
It's going. I'm excited to jump into another passage with you today. See if I can do as well as hopefully I did last week. So what do we have for us today?
A very interesting passage. I love this passage. Kind of wish I implemented it in a daily passage, a CARS daily passage, but nonetheless, it's in the podcast. So if you're listening, you're going to see something great here, hopefully.
For a student who just heard you say CARS daily passage and doesn't know what that is, give them the lowdown on that.
Yeah, so I offer daily passages, and literally a CARS passage with 5 to 7 questions, which is something you'd see on the exam every day. So you get it straight to your email, and you get to do it, and you can even discuss it with other students. And it's very similar to the actual test. It is there. It's literally like the actual test. Obviously, it's our own passages, it's our own questions, but we follow through with what they'd like to do. We think like them when we write the questions. At this point, our passages are practically known by anyone that is considering taking the MCAT. So, it's been an honor. It's been a nice kind of course into being a good, valuable resource for students. I think that's incredible. But I think there still needs to be a little bit more information on how the passages work. And the whole point of this is to help you improve, is to help you see new passages, new topics that you may be weak on, new question types that you may be not so great at, so you can improve. That's the goal. It's not just to release a passage every day, but to help you improve by focusing on weaknesses. And daily practice does that.
Yeah. Practice. Good. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into our passage today. Again, if you want to follow along, go to our show notes, which if you're on a phone, you can usually just tap or swipe on the image and it'll take you right there. You can follow along with us. All right, first paragraph. Most people have never heard of Cyrus Teed, which is a shame. So right away, I'm kind of laughing. I'm like, Cyrus Teed, that sounds like a great name. And I love that the author is saying it's a shame that people haven't heard of him.
Right. It's not negative, right?
Nope.
But it is sort of sarcastic, maybe.
Yep.
Or just the author playing with us, right? Just being fun.
Yeah. He was born in Trout Creek, New York in 1839. All right. So we're given just a location where he's from and a time period as well. As a boy, he worked along the Erie Canal, experiencing some of the worst labor conditions that 19th century America had to offer. All right. So just kind of giving a little bit of backstory of Cyrus Teed. As Adam Morris recounts in a new book, American Messiahs, Teed soon became a staunch anti-capitalist, and he spent much of his life trying to abolish wage labor entirely. All right, so now we're given another name here, Adam Morris, an author of a book, American Messiahs, and he is saying that Teed was an anti-capitalist trying to abolish wage labor entirely. And I think a lot of students will probably try to figure out, well, what's wage labor? I need to know what that means and why he's against it.
Yeah, so we need to know what capitalist societies are, right? And socialism and communism. These are things that the MCAT expects you to know. It's common knowledge.
Mm.
So it's going to probably be presented as a psych-soc passage.
Mm.
You need to know socioeconomic kind of concepts, and this is one of them, right? Knowing what a capitalist society is, knowing what a socialist society is. You don't need to know much here. They're kind of educating you. They're telling you Teed is anti-capitalist,
Mm-hmm.
and that means he's trying to abolish wage labor. So, wages are common knowledge, right? What is a wage? It's an hourly kind of salary, right? Like you get paid $15 an hour, $12 an hour. That's a wage. That's laboring for wage, right? So you're working an hour for money. So to some extent, that's what capitalism is. You pay someone to work on your behalf, right? Whether it's a big business, an individual, a small company, large company, it doesn't make a difference. So in a way, as they're presenting the information, they're telling you Teed is an anti-capitalist. They're also explaining what capitalism involves. And right now, all you need to know is it involves wages.
Mm.
Okay.
This didn't prevent him from pursuing a number of business ventures. So it's kind of interesting. It's kind of the opposite. You have this staunch anti-capitalist, but he's also out there trying to pursue businesses.
Yeah, it's ironic. Mm-hmm. Why would someone who doesn't like, or apparently doesn't like capitalism, go into business ventures? Capitalism is business, right? Yeah. It's having businesses competing for the market, essentially. But yeah, go ahead.
At one point, he ran a mop factory. At another, he hawked something called an electrotherapeutic apparatus, which apparently its owners, with the putative health benefits of mild recurrent electrocution. Yeah, okay. I don't want mild recurrent electrocution. It sounds like a TENS unit, which is very popular these days. So anyway, right. So just a couple of the businesses he tried to run. Teed was a student of eclectic medicine, a branch of healing that rose in response to widespread and frequently justified fears of doctors. Frequently justified. That's mean. But this was the 1800s, so bloodletting was a thing back then.
Right.
We're going to cure you by draining your blood. All right. So just another kind of example of what Teed was into, this medicine, eclectic medicine stuff. In Teed's day, you didn't become a surgeon if you didn't have the stomach to wield a bone saw. All right. So again, just an example of why the fears of doctors was potentially justified.
Yeah, sounds good. I think most students understand that. So Teed is sort of a business person, even though
he's an anti-business person.
Yeah. He's doing businesses, but he's fighting against labor conditions, right? Bad labor conditions and capitalism, essentially. Okay, sounds good. Let's go ahead and keep reading.
All right, next paragraph. Teed also believed that he had living within him a spirit of some sort. All right, so now we're given a little bit more of potentially his psychology. He thought he had something living within him. He would go on to proclaim that this spirit had once empowered Enoch, Elijah, and Jesus. All right, so maybe some psychiatric diagnosis potentially that Teed has as well.
Well, be careful. You're now assuming things, right?
Yeah.
We just need to know that he believed in himself, essentially, right?
Yep.
Or he had some kind of, I guess, epiphany or whatever it is. It's sort of a divine intervention, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go ahead. Keep going.
The New York Times headline wrote itself, "A doctor obtaining money on the ground that he is the new Messiah." So it's interesting. This New York Times headline is calling Teed a doctor, the doctor obtaining money on the ground that he is the new Messiah. So it sounds like the headline is saying that Teed is using this claim to potentially make money.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, right now, all we know is that it's further establishing the fact that he's a Messiah, right? Or he believes that he's a Messiah. And yeah, it does bring up the fact that he's a doctor. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. Maybe he's doing it for money. But it is establishing or elaborating on the fact that he was some kind of Messiah, some kind of divine presence. Yeah. Go ahead.
Teed called himself Koresh, a transliteration from the Hebrew version of the name Cyrus, and criticized mainstream Christianity as, quote, the dead carcass of a once vital and active faith. All right, so a little bit of information about criticizing Christianity, having a name from a Hebrew, so potentially another look.
Okay, so there. Again, still a Messiah, but maybe in his own religion. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Then in the 1870s, he founded a commune, Koreshan Unity, and announced that, quote, the new kingdom would be formed through women's emancipation. He envisioned a group of celibate, bigendered beings and the destruction of monopoly capitalism. Wow. That was hard to get through. Bigendered beings, destruction of monopoly capitalism. So we're getting a picture of someone who, again, try not to read too far into it, but we're getting a picture of someone who might be off the rockers a little bit.
All right. So, I mean, to some people that might not be so crazy, right?
Yeah.
It kind of sounds like Bernie Sanders, but with the whole Messiah going on, right?
Bernie.
Yeah. So, okay. So he's divinely inspired, right? But he promotes equality of women, which is great. And the abolition of capitalism, right? Which is, you could decide if that's good or not. That's up to you. But ultimately, we just need to know what it's saying. It doesn't suggest he's crazy at all. Right? There's nothing in here that's saying he's crazy, right? So we can't assume that. We cannot bring that up. That will actually alter your perception of the answer choices. Because I can put up an answer choice that says he's crazy, right? And you may pick it because that's your perception of it, right? Yeah. But that's a bias that the author never presents this as a crazy person, right?
True. Yep.
Okay.
All right. I gotta remove my biases. I don't think it helps that David Koresh and another Koresh was crazy in his own right. But anyway, moving on. Next paragraph. Teed is one of the case studies in American Messiahs, in which Morris exhumes the lives and beliefs of a linked procession of self-appointed prophets who tried to upend American religion and the American way of life. All right, so we're taken back to Morris here, Adam Morris, who is the author of American Messiahs, and it's just saying that Teed is one of many, it looks like, who are these self-appointed prophets trying to change everything.
Good. It's kind of taking us back to reality, right? We were going into Teed's life and what's happening and how he sees things, but now we're going, well, this is one of many people, right? That's been doing this. Okay.
Yep. They did so by attracting thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of followers while preaching a version of what Morris calls apostolic communism, which has a clear basis in scripture. All right. So, kind of painting a picture of thousands or tens of thousands of followers. And you think of this time in the 1800s, like, wow, without Instagram, how'd they do that? I'm impressed. And then just kind of talking about this basis in scripture, which I think is an important part of the sentence.
Right. So now they're talking about the brainwashing, right? Yep. So it's kind of like a brainwashing movement in a way. Okay.
According to Acts 4:32, the first Christians in Jerusalem were of one heart and soul, and no one said that any of the things that belonged to him was his own, but they had everything in common. Okay. So as a student reading that, I'd have to read that like 10 times to try to figure out what it was saying. So we're given Acts 4:32, the first Christians in Jerusalem.
Yeah. Is that necessary? Do we need to reread this a bunch of times?
I hope not.
No. I mean, I should take back what I said. I said brainwashing. That wasn't the right word. That's actually a negative connotation. The right word would be, just attracting.
Yep.
Right. They're attracting thousands. I mean, this guy might be right, might be wrong. I don't know. Right. Brainwashing suggests that, you're doing something to favor yourself, essentially. But in this case, he's bringing up, or at least pointing to scripture and how scripture works. Right. So it's essentially tying it back to religion and this movement of a sort. So I don't think it's necessary, especially if you don't know what's going on. But a good thing you can ask yourself when you're reading something like this is why? Why would the author bring this up? Why is the author suggesting this? Right. And the point of this is really to suggest that Teed was good at convincing people of things, good at attracting things, right? Try to unify people, try to bring people together in a way.
Yeah. Okay. The typical history of Christianity will tell you that this passage has been influential in certain monastic communities, but scarcely anywhere else. All right. So I think this sentence will be hard because a monastic community, I think you'd have to know what that meant potentially to know that what Teed is saying is popular in this particular place, but nowhere else.
Yeah, you don't need to know what monastic means, but kind of think monks, people that are secluded, right, in a way. Okay, sounds good. So what's the big picture of this paragraph?
So go back to the book. American Messiah is just talking about how during this period were these self-appointed prophets trying to lead people.
Yeah, lead them. People, has influenced thousands. They're building cults and communes that has a clear kind of scriptural precedent. Like they're trying to refer back to the Bible to some extent to kind of explain their point of view or their passage or why they're important, right? Yeah. And that's how most heretics come out, right? Is they point to some kind of Bible verse or some kind of part of some kind of older doctrine and suggest that they're interpreting it differently, right? And this is the right way that they should interpret it, and they should bring in their own ideas. It happens in every religion if you think about it. That's a very common attribute to religion. Okay, so let's go ahead and keep reading. So far we know that Teed is very influential in this way. Again, we don't really know if the author likes him, doesn't like him, what Morse is really suggesting other than he's influential. Okay, go ahead.
All right, next paragraph. Morse is out to prove this account wrong, and in many ways he succeeds. All right, so Morse, again, the author of the book American Messiahs. I'm not sure what he's referring to as this account. What's he trying to prove this account wrong?
It's not clear, but probably Teed's kind of approach to things.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't, until we keep reading, we won't know exactly what account, but most likely, just Teed's basis, right? Teed's
his whole philosophy.
Philosophy. Yeah.
Okay. As it happens, a resilient strain of Christo-Marxist thinking has endured in America. All right, so now we're given this term Christo-Marxist. So Karl Marx, I'm assuming that's referring to,
right?
And how there's some thinking from that world that has endured in America.
Yeah, you don't. I don't know if I should say this, but I think you should know Marxism, right? To some extent, you should know who Marx is or socialism is.
Yep.
Right. So at this point, Marxism, socialism, communism, think of them as the same thing. It's not exactly the same thing, but think of them as the same thing. And then capitalism is separate, right? Capitalism is its own thing. So Christo-Marxist is referring to Teed, right? And you could probably understand that without knowing this outside knowledge, right? You don't need this outside knowledge because it's pointing back to something. The only thing we've talked about was Teed. So if they bring up new terms, go with it. Think of it in a new way. Think of it in this new Christo-Marx way, right? It's in a way educating you on how you should on different ways that you can think of things. Go ahead.
Its adherents have almost always been celibate, anti-marriage, anti-family, relatively enlightened on matters of gender and race, and unblushingly communistic. All right, so it's painting a picture of people who follow this Christo-Marxist thinking.
Okay.
The Americans who spearheaded these movements had other commonality. They all believed, in one manner or another, that they were living gods. Okay? Which is what Teed was as well, self-appointed prophet.
Yeah. So all of this is just talking about how it's common. But we don't know why or what makes more suggest that this is not necessarily good.
Yeah.
Okay?
And again, it's not good or bad. It's just right. It's just this is what they thought.
Right. Well, I'm just referring to the first sentence. Prove this account wrong. We don't know what account. Maybe the way that this was approached. I don't think it's really doubting more Teed's philosophies. It's more about whether how Teed approached this.
Yeah.
Right. That's the key. Go ahead.
For Morris, this fact has too often been exploited as an excuse to dismiss a radical tradition. Which fact? The fact that they were living gods, I guess?
Yes.
Okay. And they're using that to dismiss a radical tradition. Which radical tradition? We don't know. Maybe it'll be the
radical tradition of being celibate and anti-capitalism, right?
Oh.
So the author Morris is basically, this is the account that that Morris is having, right? Is that basically people can use their radical, like Teed's radical approach against them. Does that make sense? So, the radical approach would be being, celibate and, caring for women, right? And women's emancipation, like they said. And that it could be used against them, right? Essentially. Or their, used against their points of views, right? Like their whole political ideologies.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Far more than for their heretical beliefs, he writes, the communistic and anti-family leanings of American messianic movements pose a threat to the prevailing socioeconomic order. All right, so again, this is Morris talking, and it looks like Morris is now saying, hey, this is really bad because it's a threat to our socioeconomic order, right? The order of our American ways.
Well, it's not necessarily Morris's belief that they're wrong. This is just how Morris paints other people perceiving him. Does that make sense? How other people perceive the Messiah.
Okay.
All
right. In other words, these men and women were, morally speaking, light years ahead of their time, and that's why we don't take them seriously. So, oh man, I'm so confused. So this is the author of the passage talking. These men and women, morally speaking, light years ahead of their time, and that's why we don't take them seriously. So it's interesting. The author is saying, hey, they're ahead of their time, and to me, like if I think of someone who is anti-marriage, anti-family, celibate, enlightened on matters of gender and race, but thinks they're a living God, I don't think they're ahead of their time. So I think this passage is hard for me because I'm disagreeing with a lot of it.
Yeah. So obviously the author is sort of liberal in this stance, right? Because the author is trying to say that this Messiah had good points of views.
Yeah.
Right. This anti-capitalism ideology is a good idea. It's okay. But the author is trying to say that they used Teed's radical kind of points of views, some of his points of views against him, right? To kind of bring him down. So, the fact that he's divinely inspired is used against him. It's discrediting him and other people like him. So, I mean, the way you have to read this is that quote is Morris's point of view, right? The communistic and anti-family leanings of American messianic movements pose a threat to the prevailing socioeconomic order. So that's something that people believed, right? Like that people did not like Teed because it would go against socioeconomic order. But really, right, these men and women who, were bringing up these different points of views were actually really ahead. They were progressive in a sense. And that's why we don't take them seriously, is because we weren't necessarily understanding their points of view at the time. We were discrediting them as much as possible, right? We were trying to throw them under the bus whenever they said something stupid, even though they had some great ideas.
Yeah.
Right. So that this paragraph is really key because it's explaining to us how, they know a lot, right? They're enlightened on matters and on gender and race, and are against capitalism, right? And their beliefs about being divinely inspired was used against them. So that's really the point the author's trying to make, is that even though they had some great ideas, they went downhill because they were too extreme. They did things that were out of the mainstream.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, all right. Last paragraph. It is interesting that these movements had progressive goals long before mainstream society did.
Oh, there you go.
All right. Okay. So there's the light years ahead. So these progressive goals. One of the first prophets Morris writes about is a woman, the Quaker pacifist Jemima Wilkinson, who assumed her prophetic identity in 1776, following a bout of fever when she was 23. All right, so this person here who is in Morris's book, a Quaker Jemima. And it's interesting, they talk about she assumed her identity, this prophetic identity, after fever. Okay.
This is just another example of someone just similar to Teed.
Yeah.
Okay.
She called herself the public universal friend, the all friend, and the comforter, among other names, and answered only to male pronouns. Interesting. So she had a couple identities and answered only to male pronouns. Okay. This had less to do with modern conceptualizations of transgenderism than with Wilkinson's belief, hinted at through 4 decades of missionary activity, that the spirit who inhabited her was Jesus. So, so Wilkinson thought that Jesus had inhabited her. So that's why she went by male pronouns potentially and had these names.
Very similar to who?
To who's our first guy, Teed.
Yeah. So bringing in this whole Messiah, divinely inspired idea.
Yeah. Okay. Wilkinson cited a passage from Jeremiah, "A woman shall compass a man," to account for this possession by the Christ spirit, and she had an abstemious Christian desire to expunge sexual activity from the human experience. All right, so again, she's citing a passage from the Bible, right? Going back to an earlier mention that a lot of times these were coming from Scripture, and trying to expunge sexual activity from the human experience. All right. Wilkinson shared this desire with her contemporary, Anne Lee, who founded the Shakers, and who was supposed to have said that there are no, quote, sluts in heaven. All right, so one name here at the end, Anne Lee, the Shakers. They have the Quakers and the Shakers. That's funny. And again, it's this last part seems to center around sexuality more than anything else.
I mean, it's similar, right? Celibate, saying celibate, a Messiah. So this is just another example of how, America's messiahs believe they were divinely inspired and in a way used to discredit their politically progressive beliefs, right? So this is just the author saying, oh, look, here's another person who's similar to Teed. right? And the key was really the fourth paragraph, where it suggested something about how if you had these communistic and anti-family ideas, and you had this movement, it posed a threat to society.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to realize that is, that's what the author believes. The author believes that they were used to discredit them, right? So the main idea I would say would be that these America Messiah's beliefs about kind of being divinely inspired was used to kind of go against their politically progressive beliefs. So, being this Messiah kind of hurt you. If you, that's what the author is saying. The author is saying, look, if you did not present yourself potentially as a Messiah, who knows what would happen, right? But the fact that you were a Messiah hurt you, right? Or hurt your ideas, your progressive values.
Wow. This is probably one of the hardest passages. I'm trying to figure out why it was so hard for me to read. Do you, like, for a student to go through that process and go, I'm just totally clustered. Like, what is a typical way to have them straighten back up?
Yeah. So the reason why I like this passage is because it brings in a confusing idea, right? And it's not easy to understand, especially if you have your own biases. And what I would tell students is break it down. Focus on one paragraph at a time. Each paragraph is kind of its own entity, right? Focus on that paragraph, understand that paragraph, and then go to the next paragraph. Don't try to connect dots. That's not necessary. You just need to know, okay, the first paragraph discusses Teed, right? And who Teed is. Second paragraph goes into more about Teed's ideas and how he's a messiah, right? Third paragraph discusses, again, more of this messiah stuff and how he's a cult leader and again tied to the Bible in some degree. Nothing new. This is all about Teed and what Teed is doing. The fourth paragraph is where we have most of our information, right? The fact that it's suggesting the author's point of view. It's saying, look, they were not taken seriously because of their radical positions. That's the point of view that they want you to know. Right. So they established this entire story, all this context to tell you their opinion in the fourth paragraph. And then the fifth paragraph just gives you another example. And that's the structure of this passage. That's what you need to know going into the questions. So take it one paragraph at a time. You may not have had an easy time with the fourth paragraph, but if you were paying attention, or at least trying your best to pay attention, I think you would have caught on to the point about how they were not taken seriously, especially the last sentence of that fourth paragraph. And I think that's more than enough to really get the questions right. You don't need to understand every little sentence. You don't need to worry about those scripture kind of Bible sentences. You need to know why the author's bringing things up. If I ask you, why do we bring up Jemima Wilkinson, right? What would you say? Why did we bring up
another example
of what?
Of someone who thought that she was that she was God or a God.
But exactly, but who was probably discredited because of that, right? So someone who had progressive beliefs but was discredited due to the fact that they thought they were messiahs, and that ends up being our main idea because they established that over and over again, right? That's a big point the author really wants you to know.
Mm-hmm. All right, there you have it. That was a hard one for me. I don't know why. Maybe it was the end of the day, getting a little tired, running low on sugar, or something else. But hopefully going through that passage was helpful for you so that you can learn how to be better, how to do better on the MCAT. Hope you have a great week. We'll see you next time here on the MCAT CARS podcast.
This is MedEd Media.